everyone, welcome back to Belle's Books. I am so happy to see you. Grab a cup of tea, get cozy, get yourself a little snack. I've got some grapes. I love grapes. Grapes are so underrated if you ask me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe before we get started. I am so excited about today's video because today I have a video all about standalone fantasy novel recommendations. Do you hate having to commit to an entire fantasy series whenever you want to read fantasy? Do you hate waiting for authors to finish their series and just feeling so disappointed when they continually year after year don't publish the third book? I'm looking at you, Patrick Rothfuss. Do you just want to be immersed into another world for a few hours without all of the pressure? Are you looking for a fantasy book to read with your book club? Speaking of book clubs, shameless plug, if you love reading books, struggle to find the time, struggle to think of books to read, defo check out my book club, Belle's Book Club. The link is in the description box down below if you would like to sign up. So if any of those questions you answered yes to, then today's video is for you. So I've actually categorized my recommendations today. So the first set of recommendations is humorous recommendations, like kind of silly, funny fantasy books. So the first recommendation that I have is Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. And the premise of this novel is that the end of the world is nearly upon us, and one set of predictions about this is actually true, and the world is going to end on the set date. So the story follows Aziraphale and Crawley. Aziraphale is an angel and Crowley is a demon, and basically the whole story is from their perspectives as they try and make the end of the world happen or not happen, depending on their own convenience and preference, which changes. It is absolutely hilarious writing, just like jokes the whole way through. It's just such an enjoyable, silly read. I would 100% recommend it. The next humorous recommendation I have is The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Joster. This is actually a children's book, but I feel like it's such a good fantasy novel that it's worth anyone reading. So it's an excellent fantasy novel about a boy named Milo and what happens when a toll booth randomly appears in his room. He travels through it and goes on all kinds of hilarious, stupid adventures. You could read this with your kid, but also you could just read it on your own and have a fun time with it. It's absurd, creative, and just a really good novel to dive into. So my next section of recommendations is recommendations with creative world building and particularly beautiful writing. So first off, we have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and this tells the story of two young magicians, Celia and Marco, who are destined to duel and have been trained for this since they were children. It also tells the story of the Cirque de Rêve, which is a magical circus that travels around and is open only at night. However, Celia and Marco fall in love and they battle their fate to duel. It's a beautiful setting. The circus is incredible to read about. It's genuinely creative and it's kind of like that magical fantasy vibe. So next up we have The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, and this is another standalone novel. The Starless Sea and The Night Circus are not connected in any way, but they're both excellent. So this tells the story of Zachary, a student who discovers a mysterious book and who then travels the world, both real and fantasy, as he finds lost cities, oceans, seas. As the title suggests, finds a starless sea, and he eventually discovers his purpose. It is a love story. It combines myth and fantasy, and it contains like these stories within stories. The setting is just incredible, and I really love Morgenstern's writing style. It is just so beautiful, and her writing is so creative. They're both kind of more magical fantasy books. So next up we have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke, and Piranesi tells the story of Piranesi, who lives in this fantastical house, an infinite house that goes on and on and on. Within it are all kinds of natural wonders like thunder, rain, and floods, and he lives in this world and he's familiar with it and he's comfortable with it. And another man lives there with him who he calls the Other, and he visits him and asks for help with research, but the more that Piranesi helps with his research and explores, the more Piranesi learns. The more he learns, the more he realizes that not everything he thought was true is true, and there is a darker backstory. Clarke's writing is just so immersive. I would definitely recommend this book. It's also quite short, so it would really suit someone who's just looking for a quick read. The next book is 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow, and this book is about a girl called January who grows up in the house of a wealthy Mr. Locke, who is her father's employer and her guardian. He's a collector and she kind of lives among his artifacts, and then one day she discovers a book which completely changes her life and pushes her towards an adventurous life, basically. She discovers all kinds of revelations about her parents, and her world and her friends, and she travels to make these discoveries, and she's pursued by the antagonists, the villains of the novel. I really liked how this book focused on parallel worlds and kind of overlapping universes and kind of reading about these very fantastical imaginary locations. I do apologise if the angle has suddenly changed of my video. My phone ran out of batteries, so I've just deleted a bunch of stuff so that I can keep filming. We're going to move on to the next section of recommendations now, and that is epic/classic recommendations. So the first book on this list is Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This novel is very different from the others on the list so far. First of all, it is an epic, which means that it's really long, and it's also kind of like high fantasy, so it's a bit more serious and a bit more kind of set in a very different world rather than fantasy novels which kind of overlap with our world. So it tells the story of two sisters, one of whom is destined to marry the God King against her will, and she travels to do this, and then the reader learns more about the world that she lives in, and various pieces of a bigger mystery are kind of uncovered for the reader, and it culminates in a captivating ending that leaves you kind of shocked that all of these different pieces have been so well tied together. Next book on this list is The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and I'm going to be honest real quick, I read this a couple years ago and I was so excited to read it, but at the end of the day I really didn't enjoy it. That being said, I think that a lot of people would, which is why I've included it on this recommendations list. So it's also epic fantasy, and it's about Queen Sabran, and her lady-in-waiting Iad, who is assigned to protect her with magic. The third storyline follows a woman named Tane, who is training to be a dragon rider. So it's epic fantasy and it gives off really strong Game of Thrones vibes. There's also like LGBTQ plus relationships and stuff, which you don't get in a lot of epic fantasy, so I think that's really fantastic. And then finally, I'm gonna sign off with The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. And I thought I would include this because often it's like kind of neglected by fantasy readers because it's a children's book, but it gives you such cozy, lovely, heartwarming vibes as you listen to the story of Bilbo Baggins as he adventures through Middle-earth. I think it's really worth the read, and it's just one of those books that would be fantastic to read when you're just looking for one singular fantasy books, or even to break into the world of Tolkien if you've always been a little bit kind of off-put because his books are so long. The Hobbit is far more accessible. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video and it's inspired you to read one of these fantasy books. I love fantasy books. I feel like they're the kind of best books to read when you kind of want to escape to a different world, and the creativity of authors always astounds me when I read a fantasy novel. Please leave me a comment down below telling me which one of these books you're going to read first, if you've read any of them, what you thought of them, how you enjoyed them. I just love to hear your thoughts in general. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!